And now we come to the descriptions of the planets within Chapter 3 of Brihat Parashara Hora Shastra. And again, this is something for you to think about, to contemplate, remembering that these verses, they're short and they're concise. And why is that? Because as an astrologer, by contemplating them, by thinking about them, that's what unlocks their potential knowledge and intelligence when you're reading a chart. So we'll begin with the sun. The eyes of the sun are honey-colored. His body is square. His habits are clean. He is bilious. He is intelligent, and the hair on his head is limited. Now, this is just a few sentences, and it tells us a lot. The eyes of the sun are honey-colored. Literally, that could mean that the eyes of people with predominant sun might have a lightness within their eyes, a honey-colored lightness within their eyes, and I've seen that very often. It says his body is square. So the form of the sun is square, which is solid, which is grounded. It doesn't roll very easy. It's a good foundation. So sun-type people tend to be of a very good foundation, to where they're not necessarily, as the moon might be, they say fickle-minded. He's solid. When he commits to something, he sticks to it. His habits are clean. What does that mean? Well, when we see someone who's clean-cut or of clean-cut nature, that means that they don't mess around with all kinds of little things. They're very direct and to the point, and they take care of themselves. They take care of their life. They take care of their appearance. So strong sun influence will make a person very approachable, respectable looking. Opposite what the influence of Saturn might be, which is the son of the sun, which tends to make a person a little more disheveled. They don't really care so much about their appearance, things of this nature. He is bilious. That is in reference to the humor and the dosha of Pitta, which is hot. If you look up the word bilious, it'll give you a little more information. B-I-L-I-O-U-S. The sun is intelligent. So the sun, prominently placed, gives good intelligence. And wherever it's placed in the chart can show where a person is intelligent. The hair on his head is limited. Some people say the sun is too hot, that it burns out the hair. Other people say that the person doesn't care too much about their hair. They don't want to fuss about it when it comes to the sun. So they'll choose hairstyles or things of this nature that don't require a lot of time, because they like to be direct and to the point. Because remember, the sun is also a dry planet. The moon. The moon is windy and phlegmatic. So again, windy, which is Vata nature, and phlegmatic, which is Kapha nature. The moon is learned. Her body is round. Her looks are auspicious and sweet. The moon is known to be fickle-minded and lustful, so her body is round. She's also fickle-minded. She can roll back and forth. She can change. She can be adaptable. It will also just specifically show a person with a round body, or someone with a prominent moon will often have a round face. She is learned, so she understands things. The moon understands. The moon has knowledge. Her looks are auspicious and sweet. That can make a person look auspicious and sweet, so you like to be around them. They make you feel comfortable. But the moon itself is a comforting nature. When the moon speaks, it speaks sweetly. It wants you to feel good about yourself. You've met people like that with a prominent moon. Everything they say seems to just make you feel really good inside, really wholesome because of that moon. The moon is known to be fickle-minded, again, changeable. Those are the kind of people that can be on one day really adamant about a certain line of thought and idea, and the next day, because they've talked to someone else, they've changed their mind. The moon is also said to be lustful. So we have to remember that the moon is the aspect of consciousness that reflects life, that reflects the soul into life. And why does the soul get involved in life? Well, because it wants to participate in all these varied and diverse experiences, which is a kind of lust. So it could be sexual lust, certainty. It could be sexual lust, certainly. But it's also just the lust and the zeal for life. You get a good moon, that's someone who, they're never going to say things like, what's the point? They're always going to say things like, life is so rich and juicy, I just love being alive. That's this lust of the moon. Mars has blood red eyes. He is fickle-minded, liberal, again, bilious, and given to anger. His waist and physique are thin. So Mars has blood red eyes. We can interpret that as to be angry. Mars gives anger to a person. But it doesn't always have to be anger like I'm going to break your legs with a crowbar. It could just be an impatient person. Or if you've ever been an individual that stayed up late working really hard on something, you just have been so focused that your eyes get dry and red. And people say, gee, what have you been doing? And you've just been working all night long because you're just so intensely interested in something. So when Mars has blood red eyes, it's intensity. It could be anger, but it's also intensity to focus on something, which if you've ever done, you will get bleary-eyed and your eyes will look red and dry out and whatnot. He is said to be fickle-minded, liberal, bilious, and given to anger. Mars does have the potential to change his mind, but usually it's almost as if we're looking at shifting allegiances. Mars, being the soldier, respects or needs to respect that person that is in charge or directing them. Mars likes to be a soldier. The only time Mars overthrows someone or causes a military coup or challenges someone is because they lose respect for the individual. So it can appear to be fickle-minded, but really it's based on this idea of respect. And so to work with someone who has a prominent Mars, you have to maintain their respect, and you have to be yourself true and stable, which is why the Sun is the king, Mars is the general. If Mars respects the king, Mars will follow the king. Mars will become fickle-minded if the Sun acts in such a way to lose, Mars will be fickle-minded if the Sun acts in such a way to cause Mars to lose respect for the Sun or the leader. Believe it or not, Mars is said to be liberal. Mars is bilious and given to anger. Again, Pitta nature, given to anger. His waist and physique are thin. This tends to make a person have a thinner body, a thinner physique. And we've already heard previously that he's of short stature. So one of the other things this can tell us is that Mars can get by on very little, in the same way that a soldier can get by on rations. So Mars can accomplish things on very little, which is often why even when Mars is in neutral dignity or in a scarce avashta, he can still do something because he's used to that. He can handle scarcity. Mercury. Mercury is endowed with an attractive body. In fact, Mercury is said to make a person very attractive. Models, entertainers, people who have prominent Mercury, they will have an attractive body and form which will be well balanced. It will be, what's that word, where it's the same on both sides. It's not coming to me. But you get the idea, the sense of form and balance. Mercury uses words with many meanings. So Mercury might say something to you, meaning one thing, but you think it means something else, and he'll be all right with that. So Mercury can be very good at poetry, very good at writing, communications in general. Mercury is fond of jokes. Mercury likes to laugh. Mercury likes to have a good time. And Mercury is a mix of all three humors, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So with Mercury, he's actually one of the most important planets for health because he brings balance to an individual. All the planets are important for health, certainly. But Mercury can make a person very healthy because of that equal balance of the humors, healthy balance of the humors. Jupiter. Jupiter has a big body, tawny hair and tawny eyes. Again, Tawny. He is phlegmatic or of kapha nature, intelligent and learned in all shastras. So Jupiter has a big body. He can be an imposing presence. And imposing might not be the right word because Jupiter is not imposing in the sense of I'm scared. Jupiter is just a big force. Meaning when you're around someone with a prominent Jupiter, you can feel them, whether they have a bigger body or whether just their energy is more robust. Phlegmatic, of kapha nature. Intelligent. Jupiter is a planet that understands things. He's also learned in all the Shastras, learned in religion, spirituality. He understands the bigger picture, essentially, and how it relates to the happiness that you can experience in life by being in harmony with the grander scheme of things. 28, verse 28 in chapter 3, Venus. Venus has a beautiful and splendid body. She is charming and said to be virtuous. Her disposition is excellent, with charming eyes. Venus is a poet with curly hair. Her humors are windy and phlegmatic. And this would be as you would expect from Venus, a beautiful, splendid body. Well, Venus deals with beauty within the world in general. So when you have Venus on the ascendant, dealing with the ascendant, or dealing with aspects of the body, it makes that person more appealing visually. Venus also deals with the visual arts. She is charming and said to be virtuous. Anytime you get a strong Venus, this will make a person more charming. Her disposition is excellent and with charming eyes. So, her disposition is excellent. This is someone who always stays in the state of poise. And if we think about it, Venus is very important for things like diplomacy. Because you might be interacting with cultures or people that either don't understand your ways or you don't understand their ways. You have to have this excellent poise to maintain control and a sense of being in command. So it gives a sense of regalness. Again, not in the sense of the sun's regalness, like I am the king and you will listen to me, but in the sense that I understand you, you understand me. We might not agree, but we can come to a compromise and we can move forward and make sure that we're all treated the way we need to be treated, equally and fairly. This is a good Venus, of course. Difficult Venus can be manipulative. And interestingly enough, in one of the books I was reading on different cultures on astrology, which I would highly recommend that you do, too often, and it's funny we're talking about this with Venus, which deals with diplomacy, too often when people get involved in an astrological practice, they kind of latch on to a way of doing things, or a culture that a astrological practice came from. And then they just assume that everything about that culture is correct and accurate and valid, and that no other culture had anything to do with anything about, the situation. And why do I say this? Because just doing some research on astrology in general, there was a time period before 500 BC up to around 100, 200 AD, where there was a strong intermixing of cultures in the regions of India and Greece, and throughout that whole band, and ideas were being exchanged. All right, and anyway, point being, in one of these texts I was reading, Venus was said to deal with war, and they're saying that this is difficult. We have this idea of Venus as love and compassion, but here we have this other culture saying that it deals with war. And they made the point in this text that that was dissonant, that didn't make sense. Because if we have astrology as a holistic idea that even on one side of the planet people should have similar ideas, then the other side of the planet, it didn't make sense. However, it does, because if you go back to previous talks on the avatars of the planets, we know that Venus's avatar is said to be Parashurama, which was an aspect of divinity that went across the world something like 21 times, killing a whole bunch of people, which is pretty warlike. Certain other texts like Yavana Jataka, when we look at the idea of Libra, I believe it is, I'll have to double check that, there is an emphasis towards behavior that is almost warlike. All right, so anyway, point being, we need to remember that yes, Venus deals over, we need to remember that Venus deals with compromise and diplomacy, but we have to remember that Venus isn't always going to be by itself, and sometimes there will be cruel influences to Venus, so that could lead to more manipulation, deception. I mean, think about the political climate now in our current age, where diplomacy is really all about war, in a sense. So keep this in mind. But overall, Venus gives an excellent disposition, charming eyes, curly hair, and her humors are windy and phlegmatic. Saturn. So Saturn's physique is long and emaciated. Long typically means tall. All right. I remember I think I was talking with Ernst Wilhelm about this when he mentioned that people in his wife's family who are Indian said that he was too long for her, which made me chuckle, growing up in American suburbia. But really what it means is tall, and he's a tall guy. So when we have Saturn influencing an individual, it can make a person long or tall, and emaciated, which is thin and skinny. So we think Mars can get by with very little. Well, Saturn can get by with almost nothing because he is emaciated. And Saturn is a planet essentially of nothingness. So sometimes where Saturn's placed within the chart, that is where we essentially have nothing and we have to get by with it. Saturn's eyes are tawny. His teeth are large. He is said to be indolent, lame, and with coarse hair. Again, coarse hair, that can be just rough hair, or it could mean that one just doesn't care about their appearance. Matted hair, things of this nature. He's said to be indolent and lame. So negatively, he might drag his feet. He might actually be lame. He can show a person who might not care very much. And sometimes that can be not caring in the cruel way of, I don't care about you, so I'm going to step all over you. Or to a point of depression where you don't know what to care about. These are things that Saturn rules over. So Rahu and Ketu. Rahu is said to be smoky and blue. His physique is mixed. Rahu resides in forests, so away from society. Remember, Rahu is the outcast here, so he can't exist in cities. He's more comfortable in forests. People with prominent Rahus are often very psychically sensitive. When they get in large groups of people or in cities, it kind of disturbs them a little bit, so they do better away from people. He is said to be of horrible disposition, yet he is extremely intelligent. His temperament is windy, and Ketu is said to be similar to Rahu. So he is of horrible disposition. So whereas Venus can keep it together in a difficult situation, a tense diplomatic situation, Venus can maintain her poise. You get Rahu in there, Rahu's the one who's going to flip out on people, okay, because his disposition is horrible. He doesn't really care about diplomacy. He's just going to go in there and say whatever he needs to say, and he might say very cruel and mean things. He is a cruel planet. So horrible disposition. These are the people that when you're around them, you kind of feel like they might be horrible people. And they may not be horrible people because there's more to the chart than just one particular planetary placement. But if Rahu is strong on a person's ascendant with their ascendant, you're going to find that there's this kind of horrible feeling in that area of life. If it's negative, it could be positive. And how we get to the good and the good and the positive and the negative and the bad, again, this is something we have to wait and see as we get further into astrology. Okay, and we'll go ahead and conclude here and carry on with the tissues of the body, the residence of the planets, the planetary periods, and the planetary tastes in our next talk.